Aum Gangadipataye Namaha. Namaste, and welcome to the third sutra of the Vedanta. Śāstra-yoniṣāt. Shastra means scriptures. Yoniṣāt means being the means of right knowledge. I have an issue with this loose translation here, because it says that the scriptures are the only means of right knowledge about Brahman. And for most people and in most circumstances, that is true. But there is one very special condition in which it's false, one very great exception that proves the rule, which is that the other source of real knowledge about Brahman is a realized guru. A realized master who has known Brahman can point it out much better than any book. But in the absence of a master like that, the only recourse is to Shastra, specifically the Upanishads. The Vedanta Sutra is written like a predicate to the Upanishads. And what are the Upanishads? They are excerpts from the original Vedas. And the distinguishing characteristic is that they are dialogues between a master and a student. So, Upanishads literally means come here and sit down. Don't just sit down like a bump on a log. Hear. Shrinu. It's a command. You must hear from the realized soul. This is the best way. Don't bring books into it, because there's always a possibility of misinterpretation. And so the point I want to bring out in this is something, it's hard for me to speak because it's so critical and disparaging, but I have to say it because it's the truth. What is it? That the consensus in the popular neo-advaita scene today is exactly, point by point, the position of the Purvapaksha, the objector, the argument against the scripture, as given by Shankaracharya. For example, in this sutra, the Purvapaksha's position is, well, Brahman doesn't have any perceptible attributes, so it can't be known even through the scriptures, so why bother? And if you look at the neo-advaita scene today, is anybody studying the scripture? They may be mouthing them, repeating them like parrots. Rock, rock, Vedic scriptures. To a sing-songy little chant, And that's something. But then you have to think about them. You have to apply them. You have to see their truths in your own existence. Like the last time we were talking about the 3 stages of consciousness, for example. And my experience is that these 3 states of consciousness, waking, dreaming, and sleep, plus the superconscious 4th state, are existing all the time. They're active all the time. Simply our attention is on one or the other. And we have the choice where to direct our attention, don't we? But most people choose to direct their attention toward the waking state as the default. And when they get too tired, then they fall asleep and like that. But really they're focused on the desire state, the waking state. I want this, I'm going to go get it. Because of that, they have an interest in distorting the meaning of the scripture. Just notice in this expanded translation, they add the scriptures alone being the means of right knowledge. But the sutra didn't say that. It didn't even hint that. No, not the scriptures alone. The scriptures or a realized guru or your own realization. Once you reach that stage. The problem is that we cheat ourselves, we lie to ourselves, and we take up the position of the Purvapakshan. Shankaracharya wrote this all over 1,000 years ago, and it's exactly happening today. The Purvapakshan says in the first sutra, what's the use of inquiring into Brahman? Anyway, it's obvious, so what's the problem? And in the second sutra, he also goes directly against Vyasadev's instruction, and similarly here in the third. No, there's no need to inquire from the scriptures because actually Brahman can't be known anyway, so words can't describe it, therefore there's no use inquiring into the scriptures. Now, where have we heard this before? On every New Age bulletin board and class and everything. But what are they doing actually? Are they meditating? Not really. They're sitting there and thinking. Are they inquiring? Not really. Again, they're thinking about this philosophy that I am that, and so on. But they're not really looking into themselves. Instead, they're going to pricey workshops and retreats organized by, let's be honest, corporations. Whether it's a family corporation or a regular business corporation. It's a corporation, which is a lie, based on a false name, making a non-form, an abstraction, into a real thing, which is crazy. So these corporations are putting on these retreats and operating these temples. In South India, the temples are operated by the government. They were nationalized. So it doesn't get any more abstract and false than that, right? Or even the smaller private temples are operated mostly by families who are taking family benefits from their functions, from their business. I know one small foundation whose assets are being completely cannibalized for the benefit of the family members of the head of the trust. And he's fatalistic about it. What can I do, he says. My wife, all my relatives, everybody wants us to sell off the properties and not do anything spiritual, not do anything really to help others. So when I saw this, I felt great compassion, and I tried to steer him toward the proper ethical course of using the assets of the trust only for sacred purposes, as it's stated in the charter. But again, I got overruled by the family and the lawyers and everybody who stands to make a profit. So I backed off. But this is going on everywhere. That what is being taught as Advaita is in fact the arguments against Advaita given in the scriptures and discussed by Shankaracharya. And this is what's being taught in the name of Advaita. Now, of course, Advaita isn't the only teaching that suffered this fate. It happens to all of them. Like in North India, you have the dualistic bhakti movement, teaching love of God, right? But if you actually meet them, they're hateful. They're hateful people, like the fundamentalist Christians. Jesus is love, right? God is love. But if you meet them and try to discuss anything philosophical, they simply hate on you. You don't even have to discuss anything. You just have to exist, and they hate you. So, all the teachings and all the gurus have been countermanded by their so-called disciples. It happened to me. When I was acting as guru, I wanted to go beyond the ordinary neophyte stage of bhakti to the spontaneous stage of bhakti. Spontaneous devotional service, as it's described in the scriptures, that has no regulative principles, no restrictions whatsoever. Basically, that accepts the truth that God is something imagined by us, or the form of God. God is real, but the form of God is imagined by us simply to have some point of reference for our worship, for our offerings, and so on. And that in the end, we are going to become the Brahman, which is the source of all forms and names and everything. So that's all right. You pick up a rock outside and worship it. Brahman is in the rock. But it may be hard for us to see the supremacy, the absoluteness, and the all-pervadingness of Brahman inside an ordinary rock. So get some special rock from some stream in Nepal and call it a Shila, and make a big deal out of it and make it very expensive to worship and so on. And then we have a cult, right? A viable cult. So people are making these cults around deities, around philosophies, around names, around forms, around teachers, around teachings, right? And all of these have one thing in common. They're external. So can they lead you to the truth? Well, sometimes, when everything goes right, somehow they're pointing a finger at the moon, and some people get it. But the realization always happens off alone somewhere, never in the context of a group. That's my experience anyway. I've never experienced anything or realized anything beyond the ordinary through a group. It always happened later when I went off on my own and thought about the teachings and contemplated the teachings until I really got it. So I think the same is true of most people. They don't really get realization by group activities, but only by original self-based inquiry into the truth. So that inquiry begins from the scriptures, yes, but it finds its confirmation in one's own individual realizations. Om Tat Sat. Om Harihi Om.